I grew up in a small desert town. It was hot, dry, and not a whole lot to do for a kid. Explore a whole bunch of nothing out in the heat, or stay indoors with the air conditioning and play video games. Those were about the two main choices. Many of the teens, once entering high school, I'm sure did a lot of damage to their livers, considering it had become a tradition to substitute the boredom of not having much around with excessive partying. My grandpa was a kind old man who made the best of our dreary little town. He'd often skip the local bar to head up to the native reservation and drink at their bar. I've heard stories in my adult life of natives, when on their reservations, not being too kind to outsiders. Here it was different. I presume it may have had a lot to do with the fact that we knew to respect them. If people from our town went up to one of the watering holes on the reservation, we knew to be nice, and if it got a bit crowded, we needed to be the first to leave. If any of the adults, like my grandpa, decided to go have a few beers up on the reservation, they knew not to be rude. Don't start any fights, and just enjoy the company. But anyway, he always brought back odd tales and folklore to tell me on nights I'd spend over at his house. See, from a young age I had a fascination with the creepy and bizarre. Don't get me wrong, it ended up giving me more nightmares than I can count, but it was worth it at the end of the day. One night when I was about 10 years old, I was staying the night with him. We did the usual tradition. He drove me about 20 miles to another rag of a town that was lucky enough to have a McDonald's, got me my usual and himself something to eat, and we enjoyed our meal, then headed back to his place. By the time we got back, it was night, which meant it was time for him to tell me some piece of creepy native folklore, or some odd first-hand account he was told by a native during his weekly visit to the bar. To the best of my memory, the story went like this. When the white man first started settling around these parts, the natives protested, much to no avail, and they soon had almost no land to call their own. After going through every avenue they had to try and stop all of this, a local shaman laid a curse on them, that one day a child of the white man would bleed onto the sacrificial stone, sealing their fate. An ancient spirit would be summoned to chase the white man off their land. It would be a shapeshifter that would steal away all their children. Any new child brought onto the land, or born on it, would be stolen, until only the natives remained. I know, not very scary to an adult, or hell, even a teen, but at 10 years old it gave me goosebumps anyway. I proceeded to ask him an onslaught of questions, all of which he didn't really have an answer for. I mean, he only knew what he was told after all. Fast forward a couple months, and it was summertime. No more school for almost 3 months, just video games and the odd trip to a watering hole to get some swimming in. The day it all started just happened to be one of those days. My mom and my friend's mom, who happened to be friends with my mom, again, small town, decided to take us up for a trip to swim. Happy as I could be, I got ready, swimming trunks on, goggles ready, sunscreen forced onto me, and we were ready to go. After several hours of swimming, I decided I wanted to go exploring, considering the fact that the watering hole allowed for fairly dense brush and trees to grow for some ways, maybe several football fields or so, and that was rare for where we lived. I ran off without a second thought, besides yelling to my mom, "I'll be back!" To which my mom responded, "Only 30 minutes, and be careful." Giving no response to that as I looked behind me to see our parents talking and my friend enjoying the water, I disappeared into the brush. I was having a grand old time pretending I was the crocodile hunter, off to catch me a croc-a-too. Yes, this was before he died. I always loved Steve Irwin. I ended up slipping on a muddy patch of dirt and cutting my hand on a rock. I inspected it closely. There was a bit of blood, but not too bad. Giving myself the thumbs up I wasn't too hurt, I continued on my journey. I came into a clearing where there was a fairly big rock and a little less vegetation than everywhere else. It didn't seem too odd to me, as I figured the fauna were simply starting to thin out as I got further away. I climbed up onto the rock, one hand after another, until I stood on top. "I'm king of the world!" I yelled, pretending to hold up a sword, much like He-Man, and staring into the sky. I sat down on the rock while holding the sides, letting me catch my breath again. After all that exploring, I was starting to get quite winded. Finally, I stood up, deciding to head back so I could get just a bit more swimming done before we had to go home. We stopped at the Natives Bar and Grill on the way home, where our parents picked us up delicious but very greasy burgers and fries for dinner tonight. Once home, it was business as usual, little bit of TV, then bed. I didn't know at the time my life would never be the same after I woke up the next morning. I normally would have slept in until about 10 a.m. on a summer's day, but my mom woke me up at a way too early 8 o'clock. "Son, did Billy come by last night?" I yawned and rubbed my eyes, wondering why Mom would be asking that. "No, why would he have? I thought they went home too after swimming," I replied, starting to get worried as my brain slowly booted up. "Well, they did, sweetie, but Billy's parents woke up to find he wasn't in bed. They wanted to check to make sure he didn't sneak out to come over here. They only have to assume he ran away now." What? Billy would never do that. There was no way Billy would run away. He had no reason, and he just wasn't the type. He would never want his parents and friends to be worried over him. The next several hours consisted of the sheriff coming by to ask me questions that I had no answer to, my mom sitting by the phone worried sick and hoping for a call letting us know my friend was okay. Nothing ever came. The sheriff claimed there was no evidence of forced entry, no fingerprints that shouldn't have been there, no sign of a struggle or violence. The odd thing was, Billy's windows were closed and locked from the inside. All the doors remained locked, and not one key was missing. There was almost no way for Billy to run off, but leave everything in the state it was. A key needed to be gone, or a window unlocked, but nothing. A couple of weeks went by and I was still heartbroken over my missing friend, but to make matters worse, another kid had disappeared. A girl this time, a couple years older than me though, so I didn't really know her. She was another that had disappeared during broad daylight while walking home from a nearby friend's house. Needless to say, the town went on high alert. Kidnappings just didn't happen where I live. The sheriff promised to get to the bottom of things though, and the neighborhood watch went on steroids. The adults of the community set it up to where once an hour, after 8 p.m., everyone would drive the streets of the town at night to make sure everything was okay. They had agreed upon who would take what nights for the first 2 weeks, and if this wasn't solved by then, they'd decide what to do after that. Everyone agreed to keep an extra eye out and pay extra attention at all times, too. The sheriff, who was actually rarely in town, could be seen driving the streets often, now sometimes even later into the night. A curfew had been set for anyone under 18 of 7 p.m. My parents tried to keep me from hearing too much, to not scare me, but I heard bits and pieces of gossip surrounding her disappearance. The most noteworthy thing was about a week before she went missing. She had started talking about how the smiling woman kept trying to get her to play. Of course, her parents at the time chalked it up to an active imagination, and in hindsight, I think they weren't too worried about a woman. Now, if it had been the smiling man, they probably would have been a bit more alert. It was a few days after the girl's disappearance when I was lying down for sleep, my parents double and triple checking every window and lock in the house, when I heard a tapping at the window. Like I mentioned before, even back at this age, I had a fascination with the weird and bizarre, which gave me a bit more bravery, or maybe stupidity, than I really deserved. So instead of running to get my parents, I went to the window. Outside was the oddest thing I think I may have ever seen. A woman wearing some type of skin-tight purple suit, oddly red hair that wasn't any shade I'd ever seen naturally on a person, and a huge smile that was too big for her face. Thinking about it as an adult, I figured it was this thing trying to fit into a world it didn't quite understand, choosing odd accessories and a smile that caused more fear than it did soothe. "Come play with me," she said in an unnerving, childlike voice. I was a bit shell-shocked at the moment, so instead of running or screaming, I just kept staring at her. "Come play with me. I promise you'll have tons of fun. I have toys, candy, your friends are here too." Something about it mentioning my friends knocked me out of the state I was in, and I let out a blood-curdling scream and ran for my parents' room. They were already halfway to my room when I ran into them. "The smiling woman, she's here!" My dad grabbed his gun before running outside, ready to empty his clip into whoever he ran into. But, as you would expect, no one was there. The sheriff was called, I told him my story, and they checked around the house. No evidence of anyone being there was found. No footprints, no fingerprints on my windowsill. Nothing. Thankfully, in light of recent events, the sheriff and my parents took me much more seriously than they normally would have. Once the sheriff was gone, my parents let me sleep with them. The next day I was outside playing in our backyard. My parents wouldn't let me more than 20 feet from the house. When I saw her, again. She was across the empty lot behind our house, probably 40 feet away or so, but I could recognize her even from that far. I knew I should run back to the safety of the house, but it was like something supernatural forced me to stay in place. She slowly got closer. Her walking was weird. Way too fluid is the best way to describe it. Like movements so precise and so perfect, no human could do it. As she got closer, I noticed her hair seemed more natural red color, but everything else was still the same. Once she reached me, I was unable to move. I knew in this moment I would die. "Come play with us," she said while holding her hand out to me. "Your friends are here, and I promise to bring you more. You'll be able to have fun forever." It was odd. Despite being scared shitless, I had the urge to agree and just take her hand, and this time there was something oddly soothing about her despite her disjointed appearance and smile that was still too big for her face. When I noticed my hand had involuntarily made its way halfway to her, I finally managed to snap out of the trance and ran screaming back to my house. Only my mom was home as my dad was at work, but it was a rinse and repeat of last time. Sheriff came out, my testimony documented, search of the place to turn up no proof anyone else was there, and then nothing. Thankfully, I heard my parents that night talking about moving. They considered several options, including my mom and I staying at my aunt's in Oregon, while my dad got the house ready for sale and continued to work while looking for a job in Oregon. Of us all staying here while they found us a house somewhere else, and a few other similar ideas. Ultimately, they decided to look, with my aunt's help, for housing and jobs in Oregon while we all stayed here waiting. And if another incident happened, my mom and I would head for Oregon early. A couple days actually went by incident-free, and I was starting to hope I had seen the last of the smiling woman with talks about a kid going missing in the town I mentioned, the one with the McDonald's in it. I almost expected this to put my parents over the edge and for us to leave, but I think the fact that it didn't happen quite so close to home this time prevented that. The day after the news spread through the town, both my parents had to be at work. My mom had been staying home a lot lately, but they warned her if she didn't go in today, she'd be fired. And my dad couldn't get the day off in such short notice. They made sure to have an hour-long talk with me about stranger danger, staying inside, and keeping the doors locked, etc., etc. I had been playing my PlayStation for several hours when I heard a knock at the door. Immediately, I went on high alert. I walked to the door and looked through our peephole to see nothing, so I tried to ignore it and went back to my video games. Another knock at the door. Checked the peephole, and no one. Before I could sit back down again, another knock. So this time I turned around and threw open the door, ready to punch and kick whoever was there. No one. My nerves on edge, I turned off my game and put on TV, hoping to get lost into some cartoons when I heard it. "Come play with me." I looked towards the hallway to see her standing maybe 5 feet from me. She had changed again. Her smile now fit her face correctly and looked more sweet than sinister. Her tight purple bodysuit was now a purple dress. I felt fear rise up in me, but not nearly as much as before. Now stronger than the fear was a feeling to trust her. She only wanted to play after all. I got up and started walking towards her, not really realizing what I was doing. "You'll have so much fun. Billy has been talking about how he misses you." The mentioning of Billy set off a few panic alarms, but the feeling of trust and kindness just radiating off her stopped it from bringing me to my senses. "I'll bring more friends of yours too. You'll never be lonely and everyone will always be happy." I was standing in front of her now, but thankfully the bit of fear in me kept me from taking her hand. "What about my parents?" I asked, not wanting to leave them behind. "They can't come, but don't worry, I promise I'll love you more than they ever could." Something about this finally snapped me out of it, and I screamed. This seemed to upset her, and no longer in a soothing voice, but a raspy, deep one, she said, "Stop. Just take my hand and come play. There's room in my stomach for all you children." I ran past her, through the door, and just ran and ran until I reached my grandpa's house. After calming me down and getting water in me so I didn't kneel over from heat stroke, I told him what happened. He called my parents, who both left work, no longer caring about their jobs. It took them a long time to get here, since both had about a 40-minute drive to work. The sheriff arrived before they did. He also got my statement and checked out our house. Of course, there wasn't anything really to be found, except an open door in a monsterless house. What my parents never told anyone was that they had set up video cameras around the house just in case. They wouldn't let me view them, but whatever was on them convinced them to say fuck the house, and we all noped out to Oregon. I never saw the smiling woman after that. We've never been back to the town I grew up in either. My grandpa moved to Oregon to be closer to us, and I tried my best not to think about those events. Though the story doesn't quite end here. A few years after that, after I was in high school and had become a normal functioning teenager, I found a VHS tape that was just marked with tape over it. What was written on the tape made my stomach drop. The smiling woman. I knew I had found whatever had been recorded that day, and curiosity just got the best of me. Despite always doing my best not to think about her, I popped the tape into our still functioning VCR. It showed me, standing in front of nothing. But what was important wasn't what it showed, but the audio. It was the conversation I had with her that day, but the entire time, her voice was this low, raspy, bestial sound, like halfway between a beast and a person. She never had a soothing voice at all. I'm not sure why she didn't show up on the video. Last I heard about where I grew up, there was a huge chunk of land that was returned to the native reservation, but until then, a steady string of child disappearances continued. Oddly enough, they stopped after land was returned. This made people suspicious that someone from the reservation took on a vendetta against the white man, but no suspects were ever brought forward.